We've all heard of one-hit wonders, but what about one-album wonders? When a full album comes out from a new group, supergroup, or side project that blows everyone away, but is never followed up. This video is going to look at 10 great bands with only one album. This is not a top 10, no ranking, just a list. I'm also only considering full LPs, not EPs, live albums, or anything like that. Just one full album. Keep in mind, there are many bands who only were able to put out one album, and I'm sure many people will wonder why they aren't on this list. I have not heard every album ever. So leave a comment and let people know of a good one-album wonder if you have one. Finally, I'm going to try and talk about albums I have not talked about as much on the channel. So I'm not counting New Radicals on the list as I've talked about them at length before, but it's still an amazing album and you should listen to it. You know how these videos work, let's get to it. Starting off with a band that helped alleviate that itch for the Mars Volta and At the Drive-In fans in 2014. Featuring the legendary Cedric and Omar duo and Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Antemasque was a side project that turned many heads just at the mention of names involved. The Antemasque self-titled album was a side project that came out of nowhere and still makes me wish there was more. Bias for Cedric and Omar's side, Antemasque was that blast from post the Mars Volta music that many people were craving a fully recorded album with, and then you have Flea, who worked with the duo before, and it was huge. This album is such an infectious trip from beginning to end, under 35 minutes long, and it makes you forget what time is. Post-hardcore to punk to whatever you want to call what Cedric and Omar make, Antemasque was that shooting star that is not coming back, and you just must appreciate that brief time it existed. Fun fact, Travis Barker was even going to play with Antemasque for a bit. Turns out he was playing for everyone back then also. After the uncertainty of Alice in Chains was arising in 1995, Layne Staley's venture with a new grunge supergroup featuring members of Pearl Jam and Screaming Trees proved it was above many other albums and bands at that time. Many people say that anything Layne put his voice with turned to gold, and Mad Season is more proof for their argument, as he stood out even when not with Alice in Chains. What Mad Season did with blues and big rock style adding into grunge made this album feel special. Long songs that took plenty of time to build, and everything had a payoff when it was quiet when it needed to be and loud and noisy at the right times as well. There is a lot to get lost in on an album like Above. There was a lot of debate of how much more we could have gotten from Mad Season, as Staley was most likely done with Alice in Chains after 96, and Mike McCready was the founding brain behind the band and told Layne he could write songs however he wanted. The results were stellar and proved more of what Layne Staley could do. In 2013, dubstep was becoming massive, and even rock and metal musicians were taking notice. So while Disturbed was on hiatus, Mr. Owa'a himself, David Draymond, got together with former Filter guitarist Gino Leonardo to make Device, an industrial metal side project influenced by Nine Inch Nails and Ministry, not dubstep. I wish more artists that year would have gone in that direction instead. Along with cameos from Geezer Butler, Serge Tankian, Tom Morello, M. Shadows, Lizzie Hale, and more, you could tell this helped express something from David Draymond in a different form. Take Disturbed, but make it industrial and add tons of collaborations. Device was wild in all the best ways, and I wish I would have had more attention back then. The production and design in this industrial project with one of the biggest nu metal voices ever was a smart idea during the downtime of Disturbed. Device played a few live shows, but other than that, Draymond said that he has no intention of making more Device albums. Bummer. The Postal Service was an indie supergroup that gave us something amazing. Everyone relished in Give Up that heard it, and that is truly all we got from the indie-gone electro-pop rock supergroup. The closest we got to a follow-up to this one-time release was a 10-year reunion tour in 2013, where the band warned everyone that they would be ending that as well with no new music and no more touring. Members of Death Cab for Cutie working together through mailing digital tapes back and forth, and then working with Jenny Lewis of Rilo Kiley, who lived in the same complex as Jimmy Tamborello. Convenient, unique, and not enough for everyone, as people still wish for more from the Postal Service. Keep in mind that this was 2003 and the digital side of alternative and indie was not as prevalent as it is now, but Give Up still could be released in present day and sound just as fresh. Everyone in the group went on to do great things, but it still does hurt that we didn't get anything else from talented musicians going back and forth sending through the Postal Service. As for singer-songwriters who did not get to see the credit they deserved, Jeff Buckley was a tragic story for someone so amazingly talented. His only album, Grace, in 1994 actually had poor sales, but slowly gained attention and became one of the most acclaimed albums that year and would have a reevaluated life of its own as one of the best of the 90s. It was part folk, part blues, part alternative, all impressive. Buckley's rendition of Hallelujah still rings out in many people's memory, and all of Grace is this blast of fresh air that makes you feel comfortable and able to feel alive with your senses. You want a peaceful, calming album that makes you glad you can feel something and sound spectacular? You need to know Grace. Buckley passed away in an accident in 1997, and Grace, I feel, was just the tip of the iceberg of what he could have offered the world if he was still with us through the years. Not only was his delivery clarity, everything was just perfect, but you hear sincerity in every single word he sang. This was a man destined to touch people with his music. When Blink-182 was looking for a potential hiatus in the mid-2000s, that's when Mark Hoppus and Travis Barker got together for something different. They went less pop-punk, a bit more electronic, and a bit more punk rock, brought in two solid guitarists, and created When Your Heart Stops Beating under the name Plus 44. This had the reminder of Blink-182, but went deeper in tone and really stood out as an evolution. That evolution in sound from Mark and Travis showed across the board. The writing, the added guitar tone, and the rhythm, the electronic elements. Plus 44 had a world of potential. A big part of Mark and Travis wanting to do this is because they wanted more creative freedom, and they proved they knew how to deliver. When Your Heart Stops Beating was quite ahead of its time. When you listen to it now and could hear how it was going to be placed in present-day alternative. The band was going to make a follow-up album until it was shelved indefinitely, and the group has been on hiatus since. Hoppus said everyone has moved on from the project, but he also said never say never when talking about more Plus 44. Punk was never the same before or after Nevermind the Bollocks. Johnny Rotten and company were obscene, vulgar, chaotic, everything that the music industry refused to promote or publish, and then music still broke through as a true revolution. Innovative is the perfect term to apply when describing these Bollocks, and while the run didn't last long, this album inspired many big-name bands for decades. The only thing the band were better at than music and performing was fighting amongst themselves and destroying their own career with the rock and roll lifestyle. It's a shame because the unparalleled attitude and fresh style at the time was exactly what punk and rock music in general needed, and everyone noticed. Anarchy in the UK and God Save the Queen became anthems for the punk movement, and even after the band imploded. It's important to remember the importance of this album, even if it was a miracle they got one album out. I mean, they're working with Johnny Rotten, so that makes sense. Speaking of punk, the hardcore punk scene and the straight edge movement owe a huge debt to the relatively short-lived Minor Threats. Along with EPs and compilation albums, there was one full Minor Threat album, Out of Step, in 1983. This was another evolution in punk, especially for East Coast United States, that inspired thousands of punk fans at the time, leading to the future of hardcore today. Minor Threat was surprisingly short-lived for how much support they had, and the full album Out of Step was impressive that it was able to come out at all, as the band really was relying on DIY for producing and making everything. The band lived the punk rock lifestyle when that term was still gaining meaning. Minor Threat should be the go-to for every young hardcore band wanting to know the roots of hardcore and punk, not just for the meaning behind it all, but how tight and well-performed everything was. In many ways, Minor Threat was a blueprint for bands to build upon decades later for the hardcore scene. Remember how Dave Grohl is a part of many bands and projects? Well, one of them he started himself in 2004 that showcased his love for metal. Probot was the heavy metal supernatural as described by Grohl himself, where he performed most instruments, mixed and produced everything, but instead of him singing, he brought in an all-star cast of metal singers that inspired him to join in on the songs. Probot really is an all-star casting from huge names in metal: Lenny, King Diamond, Max Cavalera, and way more names than people could ever guess. Probot showcased the range of metal subgenres from Grohl, and from thrash to doom, and in many ways it was a spectacle that came about for great reasons. I don't think we'll ever get a Probot-style album again because Grohl has already done so much almost 20 years after Probot came out, and the man is quite busy with many other things. But for a one-time project and a love letter to his favorite metal singers and bands, Probot was a blast. An amazing one-time entry that would branch off into years of more great music. The story of Temple of the Dog is a deep part of rock history. Spearheaded by Chris Cornell as a tribute to Mother Love Bone's Andrew Wood, Temple of the Dog boasted an, at the time, cast of timeless talent, including a lesser-known singer, Eddie Vedder, who along with Chris Cornell would go on to change rock music forever. Temple of the Dog's self-titled release was a one-time deal for many understandable reasons, and what we got out of one album was massive. Hunger Strike, Say Hello to Heaven, these are still heard on rock stations today. The album really does belong in a conversation of some of the best grunge albums ever, and it was released in '91, right when grunge started becoming a phenomenon. It's an album that was also a deeply emotional and revealing collection that was dedicated to Wood. Many people love to talk about their favorite grunge and alternative albums from the 90s, and I think Temple of the Dog's self-titled is in its own unique placement considering what bands each member would go on to be a part of, what great music came after it, and a one-time thing. It's just how good the music is. Vedder and Cornell together can really do no wrong. And that was a look at 10 one-album wonders. Know of another band, artist, or project with only one full album? Leave a comment and let everyone know. Big thanks to my patrons and a special thanks to Chris Doman and Dom Noble. You can have a say in upcoming videos, get weekly new music playlists, and see videos early by supporting Rocked on Patreon. Please click the link in the video description for more information. Please subscribe and ring the bell to get notified of upcoming videos, and you can keep up to date with Rocked on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Also, every time someone leaves the comment, "You forgot blah blah blah," I'm just gonna leave a timestamp right here so they know that I can't include every one album ever, and that you need to learn more tact and how to communicate better than "You forgot blah blah blah."